Thank you very much. Okay. Have a slight echo? No? Good. All right. Thank you all for your patience again. We have the YouTube channel turned on. So welcome to our members, our guests here in the conference room, and our guests on YouTube. I am your chair, co-chair, Mary Alice Evans, and with me is my co-chair, Suzanne Case. So we're going to go ahead and start the meeting. Welcome. And do the roll call for the members to determine if we have a quorum. So starting with the co-chair Case, are you present?
Present in the boardroom.
Okay. I am present in the boardroom. A representative for the Senate Agricultural and Environmental Committee. Is there a representative for that committee?
Aloha, I'm here on behalf of Senator Gabbard.
Thank you.
Hi.
A representative for the Senate Water Land Committee. Excused. Is there a representative for the House Environmental and Energy Committee?
Hi, Mary Alice, I'm here.
Thank you, Representative Lowen. And the chair of the House Water and Land Committee.
Yes, David Tarn is here reporting in it.
Thank you, Representative. Chairperson or representative for the Department of Agriculture.
Present and alone in my office.
Thank you, Chair Shimabukuro Geyser. Representative for OHA. Excused. Representative for DHHL.
Present, this is Tyler.
Thank you. And then representative for DBED.
Aloha, Scott Glenn, President of the boardroom.
Thank you. Representative for Department of Transportation.
Hello, Mary Alice, Ed here.
Thank you. Representative for the Department of Health.
Hi, this is Marianne Rossio sitting in for Dr. Char, Department of Health.
Thank you, Marianne. Representative for the Department of Education. Excused.
This is Jeremy sitting in for Assistant Superintendent Randy Tanaka.
Oh, terrific. Thank you very much. Representative for the City and County's Department of Planning and Permitting. Excused. Representative for the Maui Department of Planning. Michelle, we can't hear you, but I can see you. I know you're here.
Oh, my mute button wasn't working. Aloha, Mary Alice, Michelle McLean. Also here is our planner who'll be doing a brief presentation, Erin Darrington.
Thank you and welcome. And finally, representative for the Department of Hawaii Department of Planning, Zendo.
Hello, everyone. Zendo Kern, Planning Director, Hawaii County. Good to see everyone.
Okay. Is there anybody from Kauai County? No. Okay. Kauai County is also a member, but is excused. That completes our roll call. We have a quorum. Whoever's checking.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're going to
introduce people now.
Oh, let's do introductions for those people who are either on Zoom or in the room. Scott, would you introduce?
I'm sitting in for Alex DeRode from Maui County.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. And your name?
Hannah Shipman.
Hannah Shipman. Thank you very much, Hannah. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Amy Wertz, UHC grant with the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands, Land Management Services.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Brad Romine with University of Hawaii Sea Grant. Work closely with OCCL here. Also now a member of the Honolulu Climate Change Commission.
That's right. Nancy.
Hi, Nancy McPherson, planner with Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Thank you, Nancy. And
I'm a fellow from Armenia, and my placement is in the chair's office of the
okay. And our deputy AG is also attending. Thank you, Cindy. Is there anyone else that I've missed? Anyone else on the Zoom call that hasn't introduced themselves?
Mary Alice, I'd like to, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Hey, everybody. Kevin Sullivan with Hawaii County Planning Department Long Range Division here presenting today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kevin. And I see Luke Myers on the call.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Luke Myers from my email representing the Department of Defense. Thank you.
Okay, and now I see our member, George Cam. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello, Mary Alice. George Camp, Hawaii Tourism Authority Board Chair. Mahalo.
Thank you. And I also see from Hawaii County, Director Adams, go ahead.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Doug Adams, Research and Development, County of Hawaii.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else that I've missed? If not, we'll move to the adoption of the minutes of.
Sorry, Maria. It's saying that it's not connected to the right link. And so I was going to ask Cindy if it's okay if we proceed with the meeting and just skip that one action item,
We can do that.
because there's no action.
Okay. All right, we're going to defer action on the minutes of July 20th. And we're going to move directly into informational updates from commission members. I'm going to go in order of the roll call. And if ask you, let us know what you've been working on. That will be helpful for us to include in our annual report to the legislature. For the Senate Agricultural Environment Committee.
Aloha, I'm here. Sorry, it was cutting out a little bit there.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Is there anything that you want to share with the commission on climate change, adaptation, and mitigation measures that your committee has been working on?
I don't have anything for today, but please let me know if you have any questions or concerns and I can take them back to the senator.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, for the Senate Water Land Committee? Was there anyone? Didn't think so. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the House, Representative Lowen.
Sure. It might be good at some point prior to legislative session to have a more comprehensive briefing, but I can mention a few things and it won't be necessarily a comprehensive list. We continue to work on things like energy efficiency and furthering our renewable energy adoption and the electric vehicle transition, along with all the waste management issues, et cetera. But I guess a couple of the things, we're going to reintroduce the proposal to adopt an internal cost of carbon that I think the commission supported last year. We're working on a bill to extend out the EAPS goals to 2050. Right now, the energy efficiency portfolio standards ends at 2030. We're working on the EV charging infrastructure question, what's going to happen with all the federal funding and other things that we can do in the state. A number of kind of more specific measures. One is looking at phasing out the sale of compact fluorescent or lamps that contain mercury, because LEDs are more efficient and cheaper over the life cycle and non-toxic. We're looking at a HFC disposal program in the state. And again, I'll just stop because again, there's too many things and I think we're not doing a full legislative update at this time, but that's we're getting ready for sessions right around the corner. We're definitely in the process of getting bills drafted, et cetera. And if I mention anything someone would like to collaborate on or see a copy of or talk about, please let me know.
Thank you, Representative. Actually, that's a pretty comprehensive list of initiatives.
There's
Moving
more.
on.
There's a lot more.
Okay, good. Moving on to the Chair of the House Water Land Committee.
David Tarn is here. Let me just say that I'm working on a variety of different bills in all different subject areas. Would be interested in hearing any ideas offline from any of the members here. coming from the counties in the jurisdiction of water and land. You know, the rule package just came out from OCCL on the changes in a number of different areas that relate to shoreline hardening, management of temporary permits to stabilize the shoreline. And it's a comprehensive rule change. So I'm looking at what are areas that are not addressed in that we might look at going forward. In other areas, certainly realizing that as the climate changes, it gets warmer, mosquitoes keep moving further up the mountain. They keep basically being an existential threat for native Hawaiian bird species. So we've got to move forward with all due speed and diligence with landscape scale mosquito control in order to prevent this imminent extinction of our Hawaii native birds. I would just invite anybody with ideas on different matters, whether it's sea level rise impacts. My focus is on adaptation to global climate change. So how do we deal with the effects of climate change? So how do we deal with flooding? How do we deal with erosion? How do we deal with increase in heat? How do we deal with increase in wildfires? So those would be the areas I'll be working on. And I welcome people's ideas and collaboration. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Chair. Back to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Chair Cam from the Hawaii Tourism Authority.
Hello, Mary Alice. Mary Alice, I'm here.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
We got
George, your sound is a little bit hard to hear. Can you lean close to the mic?
no problem. No update at this time. And I'll share with you at a
Okay.
later time, Mary Alice, since I'm on the
All
road.
right.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you. Appreciate your attendance. Chair Shimabukuro Geyser, do you have an update to share?
Well, we've been working together with DLNR regarding, how to control the impact of mosquitoes on our native birds. And also, we continue to move forward with restorative agriculture products. We recently got funding from the legislature, so we're going to be looking at researching native kelp forests, and then also looking at bivalve species of aquaculture to increase water quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to, let's see, was there someone from OHA? No, okay. To the representative for DHHL.
Thanks very much. The biggest one is the general plan update that DHL is currently undergoing. That's updated every 20 years. This will be the first time that climate change and sea level rise are being incorporated and emphasized within the general plan for the next 20. We expect that to be approved by the Hawaiian Homes Commission, hopefully in November. Additionally, I think we have our South Molokai Shoreline Erosion Management Plan being finalized in late 2022. And I guess parallel to that, we'll also be initiating community resiliency planning efforts for Molokai's coastal homesteads in 2023. Our Aina Mauna Legacy program and implementation continues to chug along. There was a presentation to the Hawaiian Homes Commission yesterday on progress on that. There's a lot to do and not a lot of resources to do it. However, the commission has recommended that the next administration double down on implementation of the department's Aina Mauna Legacy program. And then in terms of cesspool conversion, we're currently undergoing data gathering on all islands in order to figure out where they all are. We're also looking at a variety of funding and legislative opportunities and solutions. And then lastly, I want to highlight that last session we received I think $500,000 for geothermal exploration. The department does intend to move that out and begin analyzing if there are lands on Hawaiian homelands that are suitable for geothermal production.
Thank you, Deputy Director Tyler Gomes. Appreciate that. That's very helpful. Moving on to the representative for DBED, Scott.
Aloha, Chair. Aloha, everyone. Just want to highlight two recent activities going on. First, the legislature passed HB 1800. Governor signed it into law as Act 238, which directs the State Energy Office to do a decarbonization strategy. So we are undertaking that effort now. We'll be reaching out to various stakeholders as directed in the statute for engagement across a number of issues for the decarbonization strategy. The Climate Commission is a central stakeholder in this whole discussion. So our report to the legislature is due to the 2024 legislature. So we would anticipate over the next year coming before the commission to provide a quarterly update as we proceed with it. We'll also be reaching out to individual members of the commission for engagement on the different topics of the strategy. One of the big pieces too, will be working with Marianne and her team at Department of Health to use the greenhouse gas inventory and some of the work they're doing. We will be building on that. We're also planning for the counties to build on the work that you're already doing for your climate action plans. We're not looking to replace the work we do, but instead fold it into and look at how the state responsibilities wrap around what the counties are already planning to do. And that goes as well for the electric utilities and some of the other climate mitigation efforts that are underway. Department of Transportation and other folks to build on top of it rather than put out something else that's confusing the public on what's what. The other second item I want to just report to the commission on is that at the Energy Office, we've been doing a lot of work on the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of money in those two acts, in particular in the energy space. The Infrastructure Act, which is the first one, has $40 billion in competitive funding over the next 5 years across a range of topics. And we released a survey a couple of weeks ago, surveying the public stakeholders on which pots of money are people looking at in the Infrastructure Act that they would need State Energy Office support to go after. So the survey is supposed to wrap up today. We extended it about a week. So if folks haven't seen it, please reach out. We definitely want to get a sense of what are the different funding opportunities people are looking at or waiting for, and then how we as a state can best position ourselves to go after it. This is not just the Energy Office, it's a broader DBED effort. So that includes the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority, Hawaii Technology Development Corporation, the Natural Energy Laboratory of Hawaii, and other pieces of DBED as well are all looking at this and figuring out how we can compete for this once in a lifetime money that's on the table.
Thank you very much, Scott. And then we move on to State DOT. Ed Sniffen, Deputy Director Sniffen.
All right, Alice, thank you so much. I just wanted to just give a quick update on everything. For us, I totally agree with David. Our adaptation is the big push for us. Mitigation, we mitigate where we can, but the big push is on the adaptation side. So we finished up our adaptation action plan, and the big push for us internally was to make sure that we had the policies in place to ensure that leadership supported that all of, resilience was part of everybody's job. So we reset our policies and processes to ensure that anytime anybody touches anything from a planning, design, construction, and maintenance perspective, resilience is considered in all that we do. And that's all set. So moving forward on the programming and implementation pieces, for us, we wanted to make sure that we coordinate our land use, the land use that we anticipate in the future, to ensure that we don't waste any of our resources in any of the areas that we're pushing in. To set it up, we wanted to make sure that we set up our processes to align with what Federal Highways is looking for and what we need to plan out our funding and infrastructure. So for our Federal Highways, they're recommending that everybody goes to a resilience improvement plan. It helps you set up a base level of resilience in your state. then helps set up measures in different areas. So you can measure any tactic or any opportunity that you have to see how it increases your resilience. It's not an easy thing, but we're partnering with Google right now to set up our Resilience Insights platform, which overlays about 20 different layers of information that we think is important to the state, including the vulnerability of our system, climate change impacts and the like, the performance of the system in the area, the volumes that we anticipate in different areas, the age of the system, the degradation. Alice maps are laid into it as well, so we can consider equity in all the decisions that we make. Looking at bike ped infrastructure in all those different areas. So we try to overlay all the information we believe is necessary for us to make decisions so that all of our resources can be pushed towards impacting several different things versus just one. And that's how we set up our platform. It's going to go live this Thursday. Internally, we have a set up platform for our state employees, and we have one for the public as well. And once we reset everything to ensure that we can share it out, we'll push that platform, that internal one for DOT, to everybody on this call here, so you can see how we're doing things. We're trying to make sure that it's expandable to the counties and to other state agencies, so everybody can start using the platform to consider impacts in their different areas with the resources that they have. So I gotta give a shout out to Kayla Palmer. She helped us out tremendously, especially on the social vulnerability piece of this platform. So we're really happy with this. The good thing about this is it's not a requirement of the federal government, it's just a recommendation. But it's definitely going to help us prioritize a lot better. And it's also going to help us be more competitive in the discretionary grants that are coming through, especially for the Protect funding that's coming out. So that's how we're resetting everything on our side. The resilience improvement plan is going to help us tremendously on putting our resources out there. The measures are going to be difficult to come up with, but once we do, we can help start leading the nation on it because nobody else has it out there to have that set that base level of resilience and improvements on top of that. So we're working with Astro now to ensure it's working out there. And we're working with Scott and his office to ensure that we're tying in all of our approaches. On top of that, we're looking at sand saver pilots in different areas. We're trying to do passive beach replenishments. We have one in Waialua and Kauai, and 2 on Oahu in Waimanalo and Kualoa. We're looking at software vetments to replace some of the ones that we put in the emergency situations on the North Shore of Oahu. Once we replace those, we can start pushing forward on a reef restoration pilot that we're working on with Pictor and DLNR. The intent is for us to use nursery grown coral and some coralline algae on structures that are fringing reefs. So we want to try to reduce the shoreline wave energy, the erosion that occurs, and the critical coastal infrastructure. It's about a $40 million project that we're working on that should be going over the next 4 years. If it's successful, we can start pushing that technology to the rest of the islands as well. On the mitigation side, we're still pushing forward on our NEVI funding. The requirement was all states had to put in a plan that gets approved by the federal government. Joint Office approved ours, thanks to Scott and his office for helping us out with this. We got our approval so we can move forward on the 9 4-port 150 kilowatt charging stations that were approved for NEVI funding. Once those are done, the state is certified for meeting the NEVI requirements, then we can use the money for areas that we know are necessary. The first areas we got to hit based on the federal government's guidances or requirements are all interstates and all green corridors. After those are done, we can start putting them in areas and the right charging units in different areas where we know we need them. We all know on this call that we need them in areas with a lot of multifamily dwellings, in areas that we know that our public cannot charge. So that's the second tier of planning effort that we're going to be going out for very soon. We keep moving forward on the conversions for our state vehicles. We have 47 sedans so far that are electric vehicles. We're ordering 128 trucks very soon. We're going to get about 45 of them in the next 6 months. And now that the trucks are available, more state agencies are getting involved to try and get more conversions going. Working with rental companies to see how we can help them convert their fleets as well. What infrastructure they're going to need in those different areas, and different models that we're seeing in different states for rental companies potentially renting to Uber and Lyft drivers for a flat rate per week, something like that. We're trying to work things out with them. We're trying to go net zero on all of our base yards, using our carbon reduction program funds to make sure we set up PV battery backup and everything for all of our base yards to make sure our highway system is net zero. We're working on airports and harbors on that as well. Then we're working with Senator Wakai, Toyota, and Pictor on a hydrogen pilot. We all know great electrification is awesome. I want to dump all of our dirty industry from transportation back into power, and then hopefully help power to convert towards hydrogen to make sure we clean everything up. So pushing hydrogen into to heavy duty vehicles helps out getting that resource here. It helps us start running that clean fuel industry that we're trying to push towards. Then the last thing is we continue on with putting our waste materials into pavements. We started up with Carbon Cure, and on the state agency side, developers are now using it. So Kobayashi Group built 2 buildings so far, specifically with Carbon Cure concrete, and it worked out really good. So they're going to be transitioning to more structures like that. We just started off our plastic roads pilot, and we're going up with a high wrap pilot very soon to make sure that our AC pavements are a lot more green and a lot more sustainable as well. That's all I have so far.
And that's a lot. Thank you. So following DOT will be DOH. Marianne, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a short update on our statewide greenhouse gas emissions inventory contract. The contract is proceeding as scheduled, well underway. Again, it's a 3-year contract for statewide greenhouse gas emissions for inventory years 2005, 2018 through 2022, and projections through 2045. So we had the kickoff in May, and then in August, we received our first set of preliminary emissions data for 3 new years, 2005, 2018, and 2019, as well as updates to the previous years, 1990, 2007, 2010, and 2015 through 2017. We wanted to thank all of those who partnered with us, for example, DBED, HSEO, the counties, and all the other agencies who helped in reviewing the data and providing comments. The contractor was provided with the comments, and they'll be addressing and responding to them. In the next couple of months, we got in November, we expect the preliminary numbers for the projections through 2045. And then there'll be another opportunity when the comments have been incorporated and everything's compiled in the January 2023 submittal of this data. That's all I got for now. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good news. Is there anybody from DOE?
There was somebody.
Yes. Yeah. Is there a representative from the Department of Education?
Hi, Mariana. This is
there you
Jeremy
are.
from the
Sorry,
Department of
Jeremy.
Education. No problem. And committee members, I apologize. I don't have anything prepared. This is very new to me. I still will need to get brought up to speed with our folks here as it relates to the Climate Commission, but I will confirm our presence, whether that be myself or we have a delegate from the DOE. I was told to attend today, so I'm sorry I don't have anything to report, but I'll make sure that we have that for following meetings.
Jeremy, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And so for the city and county Department of Planning and Permitting. Okay, no. For Maui County, go ahead, Michelle.
Mary Alice. Maui County recently adopted a wetlands overlay ordinance. It's a bill that requires planning department to create a map of wetlands and similarly environmentally sensitive areas that would then have extra protections for any proposed development. We've seen a lot of flooding in some of our low-lying areas that were previously wetlands. And so this is an effort to mitigate those impacts and to protect and preserve undeveloped or undisturbed wetlands in the future. The only other thing that we're working on now, and you probably sound like a broken record because I've been talking about this for so long, proposed amendments to the Maui Planning Commission's SMA and shoreline rules. And Aaron will be going into the some of those in a little more detail a little bit later in the agenda. But a lot of those changes are in response to climate change and sea level rise.
Oh, thank you, Director McLean. Let's move on to let's see. Director Kern, go ahead.
Awesome, thanks. Quick question. I have Kevin, he's going to be doing a little bit more of a formal presentation. Is that going to be later in the agenda or is that right now?
No, we have a number 5 on our agenda is the informational presentations on county actions and regulations on sea level rise. And I believe that Kevin is scheduled for that. So,
Perfect. I apologize. I've been driving around a 15-passenger bus all day with our consultants doing our code update. So outside of what Kevin's going to be giving an update on, we have our general plan is in full motion, really trying to bring in a lot of climate change and mitigation within that and focusing where we want our growth to be and where we want our preservation to be. We've kicked off our comprehensive zoning code update and subdivision code update. Our zoning code last update was 1996, or subdivision code's 1983. Thus the consultants in town, and we're doing some public outreach meetings and public input meetings, etc. So we're really excited about that. Continue working on our climate action plan. Some of the stuff that Kevin will be presenting later with our science-based shoreline setbacks. And then in addition, really trying to go beyond into connecting up with other departments, and we're trying to use a general plan for doing that and creating more green infrastructure. I really think it's critical that we can get green infrastructure that's county dedicable standards, and I think there's a little bit of catch up, so that's something else that we're working on, bringing things together. And various other items, but I'll save the time and give it to Kevin for his update. Thank you so very much.
well, thank you, and so noted. Is there anybody I've missed who wanted to give an update under this agenda item? If not, we'll go ahead and, oh, Luke, yes, please do.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I'll try to be brief. From the Hawai'i corner of the world, we continue to work on the state 2023 hazard mitigation plan update. A number of the partners as part of this have been engaged in looking at the last 4 years of the open mitigation items, and then trying to develop action items for 2023 for the 2023 to 2028 period. So we'll have a series of outreach meetings across the state in the first 2 weeks of December. We have a number of mitigation opportunities for a number of natural hazard reduction areas, including the National Brick Competition. There are several $1 billion on the table for that. And we have some open hazard mitigation grant funds from the COVID incident, which can apply to many of the climatic hazards. So we would challenge all partners out there, if you haven't submitted projects, to look at those opportunities and to work with your points of contact and with Hawai'i on those. When we talk about, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, we have these incidents, and I know this group always tends to look forward and how we reduce vulnerabilities. Hawai'i is proud to announce our disaster 4062, which goes back to the March 2012 flooding, which was a decade ago. I was not here. Finally closed on our side. So when we look at long-term resiliency efforts, that conversation of decadal change, I think, really needs to be an assumption that a lot of these processes don't occur overnight. On the legislative front, we continue to work. One of the wins from last legislative session was a resilient revolving loan fund through the Federal Storm Act. And so there's some money set aside in there. We're still waiting for FEMA to identify how the Storm Act will be implemented. But the good news is there is some initial matching funds that could be used to match those federal funds for various mitigation projects. And then when we look at capabilities from a building code perspective, whether it's flood, wind, or other climatic hazards, Hawai'i does have a legislative proposal to become a member of the State Building Code Council that has some support as part of the current executive's package at this time. The state continues to score very low on a building code perspective when we look at least some of the FEMA mitigation grant programs. And without modern building codes, especially when we have damaged infrastructure and facilities, we're putting ourselves at a challenging footprint as we move forward. So appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for your time, man.
Thank you, Luke. I have one question. When HIEMA uses the term mitigation, is that equivalent to adaptation as we use it for the Climate Commission? Because I think we use mitigation as decarbonization and adaptation as projects that can increase resilience against changes from climate change that are going to happen anyway.
That is correct. And I think we've had some previous discussion in some other circles. HIEMA uses the FEMA definition of mitigation, which is overall hazard reduction. But for this group's purposes, that kind of falls under the adaptation. And I think that's a similar conversation with a number of our other federal partners as that term adaptation is used. HIEMA uses it as a larger mitigation footprint, which is a little bit different than the emphasis that's been put on it by the Climate Commission now.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Okay, is there anyone else that wants to give or share work they've been doing on climate change mitigation and adaptation? Seeing anybody in the audience?
Yeah.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
don't usually end up on that list, but we should.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the deal on our actions. So on the mitigation side, we're working pretty hard still at getting our off-road vehicle fleet starting to convert to non-fossil fuel vehicles. So we have been exploring the lease option for electric vehicles. There aren't any trucks available right now, so we got a close eye on that. But supposedly they're coming, and then they all jam up. But there are SUVs available, so we're trying to get our staff on board with that. Otherwise, they're purchasing either biodiesel vehicles or used fossil fuel vehicles as a transition vehicle. Let's see, on the adaptation side. So Phyllis already talked about the mosquito control project, and huge thanks to the Department of Agriculture for that, and Chair Tarn has talked about it as well. And so we are working to do the environmental impact study and cultural impact analysis for the release of mosquitoes, the importation, and then pilot, and then subsequent broader release on the landscape in upcountry Maui and Hawai'i, where we have endangered forest birds about to go extinct from avian pox and avian malaria that are carried further up the mountain with global warming. So that's moving along at a very tense pace because of there's still a lot of work to do with EPA still, and the technology, but it's getting closer. This is the non-GMO, this Wolbachia infected, naturally occurring Wolbachia bacteria, but different strains in the male and female that cause them to be sterile. The engineering division has been working really hard on dam safety since we had the flood in particularly the rain bomb in Haiku a few years ago. We got emergency release of funding to really step up our dam safety program. And we now have emergency action plans in place for 72 of our dams throughout Hawaii are collectively public and private. So that's a great improvement. And we have seriously increased the interactions with dam owners who are not in compliance with high hazard dams, of which they're all high hazard because of the potential for harm to humans if the dam breaks. We do have some violations that have come before the land board. There was one at the last land board meeting. I will say that the dam owner asked for a contested case, and so that's a bit of a recurring theme, because that ends up with due process right, and the practical result is significant delay in adjudicating that and also severely straining our AGs and our staff. We also have that issue, obviously, on the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands. We have significant numbers of violations, particularly on the North Shore, of people who are putting shoreline erosion control material of all kinds on state lands, makai of the shoreline without permits or with expired permits. And the permits, you're supposed to remove them after the permit expires. People are not removing them. You're supposed to be looking at alternatives to moving your house away from the shoreline. People have not been taking any action along those lines. And then I guess lastly and we have a lot of contested case requests, which again is a significant delay and a significant strain on our system. And then lastly, on the aquatic side, we have we were able to host the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force meeting here in Kona in August and early September, and several of our legislators were present. The field excursions allowed people to see the impacts of coral bleaching that we've had in the last few years, some of which have not recovered. And the Aquatic Resources Division is now launching the scoping, public scoping of the whole 30 by 30 protected area strategy on Maui, which is one of the main ways that we can control the impacts of coral bleaching by protecting our reef fish that keep the algae down after the coral dies and give them a chance to recover. That's it.
Thank you, co-chair. Anybody else who wants to share? Yes, go ahead.
I add a couple more things for Maui County. First, we're in the final stages of our first climate action and resiliency plan. So that is hopefully going to be sent out to council for adoption next month. So we're really excited about that. And then second, we just entered into a 20-year contract with Johnson Controls for our energy savings performance contracting. So we're in phase 1 of those improvements, which will be about a $73 million savings. And we're really looking at energy efficiency, water efficiency, and a little bit of electrification of transportation in phase 1. And then we're moving into phase 2, which I think is about $110 million savings that's focused on, energy storage and power, and then electrification of transportation.
Huge.
Huge. Yeah,
Yes.
Very big for Maui County. We're very excited.
That's terrific. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to item number 4.
Mary Alice.
Yes,
Hi,
Phyllis.
Phyllis. I just wanted to add to our report that we are moving to transition to EVs and for our inspection fleet. So I'd like to give a big mahalo to Ed Sniffen and others that are helping us to put in a fleet order with the state. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Phyllis. Okay, anyone else? All right. Let's move on to agenda item number 4, which is an informational presentation on the Coalition of Partners 27 and Hawaii State representation by co-chair Case. Go ahead.
Now you made me forget what conference of the parties.
Conference of the parties.
Before I do that, I should mention from the Water Commission side, a reminder to everyone, we're in an extensive statewide drought, and we should all be trying to, all of the agencies, especially departments, should be trying to get their programs to cut back water use significantly. We have several areas that are significant users of water, particularly like boat washdowns throughout the state harbors. And so we have significantly limited the that water because it's a huge amount. So any big opportunities like that to cut back your department's water use is really important everywhere in the state right now. Conference of the Parties 27, the 27th Conference of Parties for the climate change, the Global Climate Change Conference We have attended, the governor was at the last COP26 in Glasgow, the State Energy Office, DLNR were represented there, and many people in Hawaii. It was a large contingent, so that was terrific. And before that, COP23 in Bonn, DLNR was there, and the first one Hawaii went to. So the COP27 is going to be in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt in November, and it's a really important opportunity for Hawaii to showcase all of the terrific work you all are doing, and you know, Hawaii is a sort of a microcosm for the world, a leader and a collaborator. If we can do it, anybody can do it. If we're doing it, no matter what the total global impact, hopefully that inspires others to do it. So because the administration is in a transition period, we feel it's very important to have an ongoing presence there. So we're going to be sending Leah Laramie as the state's representative, our climate change coordinator, to go. So if any of you are planning to go, please coordinate with Leah. I'm sure she would love to coordinate with you on how to participate there. She's working very hard with the representatives in the U.S. Climate Alliance and the Climate Registry to coordinate all the presentations and to identify the key partnership building opportunities of the COP. And so again, let's all coordinate. If any of you are planning to go, it's just really important to maintain this Hawaii presence through changes in administration, and Hawaii's presence at a high level has made a real difference in the inspiration and action at the COP. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair Case.
They'll be reporting back at the April meeting on it.
There you go. And thank you, Leah, for heading up that, what we hope will be a Hawaii team at COP27. We move on to agenda item 5, information presentation on county actions and regulations on sea level rise. This again is a non-action item. We'll start with a video from Kauai County. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be at the meeting in person, but they have provided a video which is being teed up right now. There we go. Can you all see it? Can I see a nod? Oh, good. All right. Go ahead and turn up the sound or get started on it.
We don't have the sound.
I don't hear it. No. Thank you, Sendo, for any little bit better on the sound.
Nothing on our end.
Yeah. Turn up the sound or
You
get
know, the
started
life
on
of
it.
a public servant offers us an opportunity.
We don't have the sound.
I don't hear it. No. Thank you.
You know, the life of a public
Sendo
servant.
for
You can hear it.
Hear it.
The
little
YouTube
bit
on your
better.
Ernest.
We hear it on Zoom.
Nothing on our end.
Yeah. Turn up the sound or
You
get
know, the
started
life
on
of
it.
a public servant offers us an opportunity.
We don't have the sound. It's not on here. It's on Ernest's computer and he's sharing.
Sendo for
You can hear it.
Hear it.
The YouTube on your Ernest.
We hear it on Zoom.
Nothing on our end.
It's on the loop right now.
turn up the sound or
You
get
know, the
started
life
on
of
it.
a public servant offers us an You know, the life of a public servant
It's not on here.
offers us
It's
an
on
opportunity
Ernest's
to many
computer and he's
times
sharing.
give the
Sendo
servant our
You can hear it.
peers would consider
The YouTube on your
fairly
Ernest.
We hear it on Zoom.
Nothing
It
on our
shouldn't
end.
be on the loop right now. Meeting.
Turn up the sound or
You
get
know, the
started
life
on
of
it.
a public servant offers us an You know, the life of a public servant
It's not on here.
offers us
It's
an
on
opportunity
Ernest's
to many
computer and he's
times
sharing.
give the
Sendo
servant
for
You can hear it.
our peers would consider
The YouTube on your
fairly
Ernest.
We hear it on Zoom.
It shouldn't
Nothing
be
on our end.
on the loop right now. Meeting. Let me mute this. Play it on here so that I can-
Public servant offers us an the life of a public servant.
It's not on here.
You may want to pause the video.
The life of a public servant offers us an opportunity to many times serve the members of our public.
We hear it on
So
Zoom.
we would consider not necessarily instant gratification,
mute
but
this.
tangible
Play it on here
results.
so that I can-
When we send our Public roads, servant fix them, offers us an give that community the life of a public servant.
It's not on
You may want to
here.
pause the video.
The life of a public servant.
More technical difficulties, folks. Sorry about that. We're gonna try and figure out on our end how to get the video to work without all the echoes, and go to the next county presentation.
All right, Aaron Darlington, excuse me, I mispronounced that, Darrington for Maui County. Would you go ahead and proceed with your presentation while we try to work out the technical challenges of getting Mayor Kawakami sound coordinated? Aaron, are you still on? Wait, yeah, go ahead.
I see Aaron on.
Yes, can you,
Do you have
sorry,
a
I was
video
having
set up
trouble
so you can-
unmuting there. Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Oh, sorry,
Hello?
Aaron. Try
Yes,
now.
we hear you. Go ahead, Darren.
Sorry, Aaron.
Wonderful. All right, it has been a day of technical difficulties, so pardon me as I try to get the slideshow to display properly. All right.
good job.
Thank you. It's always nice when technology works for us. So aloha, co-chairs, commissioners, representatives, distinguished members of today's meeting. My name is Erin Darrington, and I am a senior coastal planner with the Maui County Department of Planning's current division's environmental section, excuse me, or what we commonly call the shoreline team, because that's a mouthful. I'm relatively new to Maui, but I've been working on sea level rise and coastal management issues in the Pacific for over a decade now, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share this update regarding some of the innovative policy and planning initiatives underway in Maui Nui. I want to thank our director, Michelle McLean, who is also on this call, and our colleagues at the Maui County Office of Climate Change, Resiliency, and Sustainability, as well as this commission for your support of taking urgent climate action and for extending this invitation today. As you can see on the title slide, I've modified many of these slides from a more detailed presentation that our colleague Tara Owens from the University of Hawaii Sea Grant Program had provided previously. So I wanted to thank her as well. In today's presentation, I'm going to be giving you brief updates on the state of Maui shoreline as it's relevant to sea level rise, and discuss how we are working to update policies and plans to address the change that we are already seeing and the change that we know will come through our shoreline rules and through adaptive pathway planning approaches. We, as you know, have a very diverse set of environmental conditions around Hawaii, and Maui Nui is no exception. Fortunately, there are many examples of relatively healthy, wide beaches with coastal dune systems that are intact, that serve as nature-based solutions to rising sea levels, increasing storm surges, and coastal erosion. Unfortunately, we also have many examples around Maui of the development that is threatened by erosion and waves, and our natural systems, reefs, beaches, wetlands, and dunes that have already been altered and lost are not functioning to protect these areas as they maybe should. The image here shows a failed seawall in front of the condominium in Ma'alaia and Maui, and you can see the sign reads, "Danger, seawall is crumbling." Images like these are our canaries in the coal mine. Impacts from the observed average 1 inch of rise in sea levels we've already been seeing in Hawaii that are affecting our shorelines today. Ma'alaia is a location of ongoing comprehensive planning that is also being supported by the County of Maui to assess management options to inform adaptive management pathways. In fact, we'll be having a hybrid online in-person community meeting to discuss initial data and kick off this long-term planning dialogue on November 9th. So please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to learn more or receive meeting details. But for Ma'alaia, for Maui Nui, for our coastal communities in the state and in the region, looking forward to address vulnerabilities and associated sea level impacts and resolving these issues and hopefully avoiding more like them now, is part of our collective charge and challenge in the planning process. To meet this challenge, Maui County is applying data-driven approaches to assess and address impacts of sea level change to our vulnerable shoreline areas. This erosion is affecting all regions of Maui, and here we have some representative photos of the conditions from West Maui, South Maui, the North Shore, resulting from erosion and high wave impacts that are magnified by rising sea levels. 85% of Maui's shorelines are eroding, and our beaches are experiencing the highest rates of erosion in the Hawaiian Islands. These impacts are expanding and worsening with sea level rise, which is why we are taking action to address them at numerous levels. Obtaining and applying best available data is critical to meet this challenge. And one of our most used tools is the Hawaii Sea Level Rise Viewer that I imagine all of the attendees here are familiar with. But this viewer is a tool that was developed using the models that informed the 2017 Hawaii Sea Level Rise Vulnerability and Adaptation Report, which was initially mandated by the Hawaii Climate Change Adaptation Initiative, or Act 83, in 2014. The viewer was launched at the end of 2017, and it's been providing us with localized and property scale maps of future exposure to sea level rise. The significance of this viewer is that it provides a tangible basis for planning and policy discussions. We know that sea level rise is affecting us in 3 different ways: passive flooding, highway flooding, and coastal erosion. And each of these are modeled and mapped in the sea level rise viewer. So the image you see on the right of your screen is the sea level rise viewer, with the red line representing projected erosion with a 3.2-foot sea level rise. And this is in alignment with our statewide planning target as recommended in the 2017 report. In probabilistic terms, this line represents about 80% confidence that development will not be impacted by sea level rise exacerbated erosion landward of this line through the end of the century. So as a policy matter, the planning department is already applying these projections by requiring that applications look at the sea level rise exposure area, or the SLREXA, and include an assessment of potential risks in a report that we are calling a mitigation program. So the application of the SLREXA guidance is posted on the planning department's website, and I've included a link in the notes for further reference. As Director McLean mentioned, the proposed amendments to Maui's shoreline rules would be incorporating this red line, and we refer to it in that rule update as the erosion hazard line. And this change would require new development or redevelopment to be sited landward of the line, plus an added 40 feet as a minimum future buffer. This is meant to ensure the safe siting of coastal development and protection of sensitive cultural and environmental resources from coastal erosion and sea level rise now and moving forward. So although we're already considering potential impacts of sea level rise in terms of potential significant effects for analysis under the Special Management Act, the current Special Management Area, the current shoreline rules use a formula that relies on historical erosion rates. So even though this method was progressive when it was codified in 2003, it basically is backwards looking, and it requires a state certified shoreline survey and applies either the greater of the erosion based or lot depth setback to confirm the shoreline setback area. So these calculations do not factor in the sea level rise projections, what we're already seeing and what we know will continue to occur. To address this, what is being proposed in the new rules is to use the distance of the erosion hazard line for the 3.2 feet of sea level rise, or a setback of 200 feet as mapped by the department, with the applicant's option to apply the lot depth with a certified shoreline survey. This flexible approach will provide more administrative discretion on when shoreline survey certifications may be required, and will support the incorporation of future erosion conditions with sea level rise into planning projects now. So read together with other proposed updates within the rules, this revision will support proactive risk management and response that will further countywide efforts to build our adaptive capacity and respond to the existential threat that sea level rise is bringing to our shorelines today. In addition to the proposed amendments, there are some other policy and planning applications that I think are cutting edge that I was hoping to highlight with this group. Later this month, of course, we'll be presenting these shoreline rules and the SMA rules to the Maui Planning Commission, who will ultimately decide what updates, if any, they'd like to adopt. And those rules will only apply to Maui, not to Molokai or Lanai, which have their own planning commissions with their own sets of rules. So even though it's going to be a long haul to get those updates incorporated through Maui Nui, there is a lot that is already being done to incorporate this data into vulnerability assessments, hazard mitigation plans, and community plans, as well as help assess potential impacts within the shoreline setback. So I'll just be sharing a few of those with you today. Major highlights really are the updates of some of the vulnerability assessments for hazard planning purposes, which I will not be detailing. So I really will just be focusing more on the planning elements. And those include the recent sea level rise data that has been incorporated into the West Maui Plan. This was an effort that was supported by many of the folks, I think, in the meeting today, with the help of NOAA's Coastal Resilience Grant. Researchers from University of Hawaii and PAC-IOS worked together to develop 2 new regional tools to help us get a better sense of the localized impacts, the high wave events, and the erosion that are occurring in West Maui. And those wave run-up forecasts, 6-day forecasts, and wave flooding tools were incorporated, considered, referenced in the West Maui Community Plan that has been developed and was adopted and became effective in January 2022. The West Maui Community Plan contains a lot of sea level rise related data and policy guidance. And I've included a link here for easy reference, and we'll highlight just a few of the major supporting policies of the goal 2.1 to support ready and resilient systems, which is very connected to climate change and sea level rise policy. Because this state Coastal Zone Management Act codified in Hawaii Revised Statute 205A requires review of projects for consistency with adopted plans. This policy guidance will be applied to assess applications for development within the Special Management Area, SMA, to ensure these projects are assessing and addressing sea level rise risks and leveraging adaptation opportunities whenever possible. Recommended actions within the West Maui Plan include Action 1.01 to conduct a detailed vulnerability assessment of all existing county infrastructure and facilities in West Maui that are within the state recognized Lorexa and subject to other coastal hazards, and to continue coordination with the state on key infrastructure and facilities, as well as Action 1.02 to conduct a feasibility study on managed retreat of at-risk developments in West Maui. And that would include an analysis of alternatives, interim steps to achieve managed retreat, identifying incentives for proactive retreat, and supporting developing programmatic environmental documents to assist in implementing managed retreat. Such a project is actually ongoing in the Ma'alaya village. And as I mentioned, we do have some upcoming meetings here. Be happy to provide more information. So this is just a brief overview. But in short, the goal of this project is to conduct a feasibility study of management options for at-risk development along the coast here. And it started with a sand study that actually should just be wrapping up. We'll be getting the report before the community meeting. And then we'll be working to identify some potential adaptive pathways to discuss with the community what options are viable, permittable, what the timelines might be, what monitoring thresholds and triggers might be, and sort of plan out next steps from there. So that will be a ongoing planning process. But if you'd like to join that meeting, please do reach out. Another adaptive pathways planning project that I think is a leading example of incorporation of best available data into planning and asset management is the recently published Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Strategies dashboard and report from the Department of Parks and Recreation. This initiative was started in 2020, and it is an assessment of vulnerability of the Parks and Rec Department's beach parks to a variety of coastal threats that really has a strong focus on sea level change. The study objectives were to assess vulnerability of the parks to coastal hazards and sea level rise, to determine the potential for each beach park to adapt to future conditions, to identify adaptation strategies for each beach park, develop a prioritization framework, and then recommend policies, strategies, and actions to address the short and long-term impacts of climate change. The project assessed 65 beach parks in Maui County for these considerations and ranked them based on adaptation potential, high, medium, or low, and then linked those adaptive potentials to adaptation strategies or pathways that you see listed on your screen. So it's important to note that the SLUREXA was used to assess future conditions based on the 5 indicators outlined in the vulnerability assessment. And then for each of the beaches, we have adaptation strategies outlined that can be, that were right sized for each particular park. And this is the dashboard that supports that analysis. It's a park profile is developed for each park based on these inputs. And overall, 14 parks were identified as having high adaptation potential, 39 as medium, 12 as low. And I really was looking forward to sharing this out today. I want to thank David Yamashita from the Department of Parks and Rec for sharing these screen grabs and for the work that he's done on this project. I think it's really an excellent example of proactive planning for our parks that offers tremendous potential for other public assets as we work to collectively try to build our adaptive capacity and respond to the existential threat that sea level rise is bringing to our shorelines today. So with that, there's so much great work in terms of planning and implementation of sea level science in Maui. I hope these highlights are helpful for your conversation and dialogue. It is really just a snapshot, but I do appreciate once again the opportunity. I will leave you with a big mahalo for all of your work and this image of beauty and resilience looking at a recently restored coastal dune on Maui. Another example of cooperative county projects leveraging nature-based systems to protect infrastructure and use values that builds adaptive capacity of our shoreline and communities to the change that we know is coming. So thank you again for your work and this opportunity to share just a few examples of how data-driven policy and planning is being incorporated into Maui County efforts. So thanks again. I'll stick around if there are any questions, and please feel free to reach out if you have follow-up questions. Mahalo.
Thank you, Erin. We'll hold questions, although I'm sure many of us have questions about this, the important work you're doing, but let's hold our questions until we've heard from your counterparts. Let's start with Kevin Sullivan for Hawaii County. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. I'm gonna share screen. I'm kind of terrified because I have an embedded video in here, but we will see how it goes.
Terrific.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Mahalo for this opportunity to present about how we're managing looking at sea level rise and setbacks. This is before you is a list of County of Hawaii initiatives listed by official contractor project names. Everything has a sea level rise component. Most have a direct connection or consideration to sea level rise. Also, as Zindo mentioned, the county's general plan comprehensive review is still underway and have a code audit update starting. And I'm sure some of those will be incorporating outcomes, products, and ideas from many of these here that you see listed. The first several, the USGS, PICAS, CZM, NOAA, and FEMA projects have they started up under COVID to help with the county's approach to integrated CZM, specifically regarding revised setbacks and buffers. The phases are based on start date from disparate funding sources. The same FEMA HMGP project that's paying for setback policies, paying for the climate action plan, both arising from our multi-hazard mitigation plan. And then down at the bottom, the NASA projects are more of a recent addition the last couple of years, thanks to connections garnered via the Mayor's Sustainability Summit and geospatial needs of the county. So I'm going to go down these this list in the following slides in more detail, but this sort of simplifies it a bit as to what each thing is really entailing. Most, if not all, have a geospatial component, some more than others, and I will try to focus on the sea level rise components of these projects in the following slides. So I'm going to start off with phase one, which was a pivotal genesis in our efforts. During COVID, we began looking full spectrum in some select geographies, and this short video does provide a good context for the remaining slides, so I'm going to play it or try. It was featured at COP26 in Glasgow, so here goes nothing. Great.
Squeezed between our steep volcanic slopes and the rising sea, Hawaii Island's coastal communities are very vulnerable to natural hazards, including earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, coastal erosion, landslides, and high storm events. These natural hazards make Hawaii County one of the most vulnerable counties in the United States. And in some cases, residents have lost their homes due to impacts from sea level rise and climate change. And in other cases, they're having to redevelop and redesign their properties to accommodate for the hazard.
Hawaii Island is extremely different from all the various other islands or moku'us that we have here in Hawaii. We have these sheer, very tall sea cliffs, and we have different geomorphic regimes. And so what we're trying to do is better understand these changes along these coastlines so that we can provide up-to-date data and information to policy and decision makers like the County of Hawaii.
We formed a relationship with the County of Hawaii, University of Hawaii at Hilo, and the Manager Climate Corps of the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center to obtain quantifiable data about our shoreline dynamics and changes in order to adapt our shoreline setback policy, which will make our coastal communities much more resilient to climate change impacts.
We've been able to document change rates in the Hamakua Coast area that are fairly striking. Some of the maximum change rates we've seen are about 10 meters of shoreline retreat, of coastal cliff retreat over about a 50-year period. And now what we're doing is we're trying to expand this project across the entirety of Hawaii Island, which is quite a large area. All the other Hawaiian islands can fit inside our island. So the coastline is very, very long. And so to get at that, we're using manned aviation, we're using helicopters and a custom imaging system that we're using to basically capture imagery across the entirety of the coast and use that to generate three-dimensional models and a good, accurate, contemporary baseline for the shoreline. And so I think that the scientific approach and being able to quantify the amount of shoreline change which has gone on in the past, and also project the types of shoreline change rates and erosion rates we're going to see in the future is very helpful to inform the regulatory framework which surrounds how we're using infrastructure and planning projects in the future.
So just a reminder, as part of this work, there was a significant riparian component as part of the CZM efforts, and that is being scaled via the FEMA HMGP project, but I'm not going to highlight that today due to time and breadth. The next slide. This presents the sea level rise modeling methods that are being scaled out from phase one. We ran at least 750 iterations of the Monte Carlo simulation to calculate 68 and 95% probability values on inundation modeling for 3 different sea level rise scenarios: 1.25, 2.5, and 3 3/4 above mean sea level. And we did quality check it against the SLEXA, and we're happy with the results from that high-res imagery. Differentiating sea level rise impacts between inundation of lower and higher elevation shorelines is important for us, as we're finding various factors and hazards are at play depending on the landform impacted. So, for example, we know sea level rise impacts are constrained along our cliffs and higher elevations. These require a different analysis and setback approach. So we've begun working with the cliff feature delineation tool from USGS to help us better delineate our cliffs and better determine how and why these landforms are changing and responding to climate and sea level rise. We're carrying all of these methods, these coastal methods, forward based on a coastal survey priority map to better align, to better plan and scale our approach island-wide, as you heard Ryan mention in the video. Along with this strategy, we find it important to continue to develop coastal classification systems for our varied coastal landforms. Using an Australian-based model, we've developed coastal land codes with form and fabric attributes that can be built upon as we learn more. And we do want to continue using the coastal or the cliff feature delineation tool to define primary features like bottom top of cliff, as well as subsidiary features such as talus, cliff toes, convexities, and concavities along our cliff and bluff faces. And my understanding is using this tool is sort of novel for Hawaii and hopefully, in my mind, leverageable onto neighbor islands landforms. So we're also really looking forward to the new long-awaited LiDAR coming from USGS, which I understand is very soon this month. So that's good news. Moving into the policy realm, as the science builds to support our setback approaches and methods, we're currently looking at a Trinity method. We would apply sort of all three to any single parcel, and whichever is greater or most restrictive would be applied. The coastal classifications we are developing are also going to be helpful to better understand where these approaches will become more salient and identify any gaps or room for setback method refinement between them moving forward. Largely, the assumption is that there will, more times than not, be one for lower elevation shores where sea level rise plays more role, and one for higher elevations like bluffs and cliffs, and those will be based on a slope stability setback. And then with the state minimum 40 feet being sort of a de facto default setback. There's also code chapter integration recommendations included as part of this work, since we're in the midst of a code audit, and the riparian buffer work is looking to be fit easily enough into our general plan. That said, overall, moving forward, we're working towards having our setbacks codified rather than rule-based. The next slide shows the current recommended approach we're taking for lower elevation shorelines where sea level rise and flooding would be most important to consider. What this is a coastal flood hazard area that was modeled as part of the 2018 State Hazard Mitigation Plan that takes into account an increased still water elevation for 3.2 foot sea level rise. Sort of acts as a coastal A zone of sorts that will allow us to begin to adapt in those areas subject to future sea level rise and flooding. That coastal flood hazard area would predicate our coastal setbacks and the associated limitations, policies, and best practices within them. Although these recommendations are under drafting, it will allow us to strengthen regulations in our velocity zones and work toward amending our flood code, hopefully, and in turn, our community rating system, which of course affects insurance rates, among other things. This HMGP contracted work also allowed us to rank parcels based on combined hazard vulnerabilities. And this is feeding into the sister sub-project for HMGP, which is the Climate Action Plan. These last two slides highlight some work that's being undertaken for climate change resiliency and overall operations as pertains to climate adaptation and improved capacity for geospatial intelligence. The Climate Action Plan is providing higher level guidance for inclusion at appropriate plan scales like the general plan and multi-hazard mitigation plan. Interventions and tools will guide the county's adaptation priorities in the future, including capital improvements plans. And of course, it's important to understand the compounding and cascading effects of climate change on our moku. Finally, I think we're proud to showcase some work we've been included on by NASA and Dr. Roberta Martin with Arizona State University Center for Global Discovery and Conservation Science. This is part of the county's desire to utilize more sophisticated geospatial analyses and tools via Earth observation data, since those are becoming more broadly available and can be consistently updated. I also understand SOAST is speaking with NASA in regards to the Cosmos work CHIP's undertaking. So we're glad to be joined at that table and hope to stay close with his team with that important modeling over the next several years. So that is sort of it for me. You can learn more at the county profile page on the CZM website and our reality check case study on the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit webpage, and I can put those breadcrumbs in the chat. Otherwise, if anybody wants to know more, you can, of course, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear from you. But that ends my presentation, and thank you again for the opportunity to present these updates and showcase some of our efforts. And thank you certainly for everyone that is helping the county to fund, implement, and complete these all too important pursuits on our island's home. So mahalo nui.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, Zendo, for making Kevin available to the commission. That was very exciting. There's just an amazing amount of work going on in Hawaii County. We're now going to move to Alex Yee with the city and county. I didn't see Alex. Is he there? Okay, great, Alex.
I'm
Go
here.
ahead. We can hear you.
Mahalo. I'm going to share my screen very quickly as well. If I could. All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Great. Aloha mai kako. My name is Alex Yee. I'm with the City and County of Honolulu's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Mahalo for the opportunity to address you today and share some of the work that's happening in the city and county related to sea level rise planning. So the first thing I want to provide a quick update on is the office's current development of a climate adaptation strategy called Climate Ready Oahu. We're currently expecting to release this for public draft sometime in early 2023. So far, we've been doing, apologies. So far, we've had, we have had quite a robust campaign of public engagement throughout this year. This climate adaptation strategy offers a broad framework for aligning city action and priorities around 5 primary climate hazards, of which sea level rise and coastal erosion is the first. Increasing temperatures and extreme heat is the second. Decreasing precipitation over time or drought is the third. Rain bombs being the fourth, and hurricanes being the fifth. The city and county has also been dealing with implementing the legislature's Act 16 from 2020. DPP has seen a 65% increase in SMA applications since passage of Act 16. And in response, DPP has introduced a number of actions, including some new tools, screening tools like the SMA determination form. They have done some more concurrent review of building permits and SMA permits, and they are looking into, they have hired a coastal zone manager and are looking into potentially creating an entire branch for coastal zone management. Additional streamlines for the permitting process are also being reviewed. But of course, in addition to the implementation measures that DPP has already started, the administration earlier this year introduced 2 bills to the City Council to further implement Act 16. These are bills 41 and 42 from 2022 relating to shoreline setbacks and the special management area. Bill 41 would increase the shoreline setback, which is currently 40 feet from the shoreline, to 60 feet, or 60 feet plus 70 times the annual erosion rate in areas where erosion data is available outside of the primary urban core. As you can see on this slide, the bills were introduced in June, and their current status is that they're postponed. We know that the council is currently about to be going through some change with the upcoming election. We know that there is still keen interest in these issues. The introduction of these bills and the public hearings that they've had already have created awareness, community interest on these topics. And we are looking forward to working with the incoming council members, as well as continuing to do additional community outreach and discussion in partnership with DPP about these topics. But some of the things that we know are not changing are that the current status quo of our shoreline management on Oahu is not necessarily enough. Our setbacks are certainly not enough. And one of the first principles that we're committed to is doing no harm, doing no additional harm. And that means as we're permitting new structures, we need to be making sure that we're following the lead of our colleagues on Kauai, Maui, and Hawaii counties in helping these new structures be as resilient as possible. The other thing that we know is that communities have been calling for and affirming the need for increased shoreline setbacks for over a decade. And the council has also adopted, in each of the development plan and sustainable community plan updates over the past decade, policies for increasing shoreline setbacks. So this is to put into the broader context, this is an issue that has long been at the forefront of the community's mind, but have also been a central point of discussion with the community for a long time. And we're looking forward to working with council to finally implementing these planning documents. And then lastly, I wanted to just talk about the comprehensive approach. Obviously regulation is a crucial and needed thing, but it's certainly not the only tool that we have in our toolbox for addressing sea level rise and implementing adaptation. Earlier this year, the City Council considered some of the market-based tools, including the first step toward a TDR program that was initially introduced with the first draft of Bill 10, the update to the land use ordinance. While that has not been retained in the current council draft, this is still something that we know council members are interested in talking about. And actually CCSR, my office is currently in talks with folks at the University of Hawai'i to do a TDR and real estate study to try and better understand some of the parameters and factors that might go into eventually crafting, a framework for how TDR might work in the city and county. On the regulatory side, I've already talked about Bills 41 and 42 and some of the process updates for SMA permits that DBP has undergone. On the planning side, in addition to the development plan and sustainable community plan updates and Climate Ready Oahu, DPP is currently working on developing a scope of work for a Waikiki special area plan and has been in talks with the state OP CZM office on coordinating the scope and timeline with their Waikiki Resilience and Action Plan, I believe it's called, right, Mary Alice? In addition, the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency has worked with the Board of Water Supply on a Mapunapuna Kalihikai area drainage assessment and action plan as one of the hotspots for passive flooding here on Oahu. And we also have been recently awarded a Department of Defense Regional Resilience Assessment Grant that is going to focus on primarily transportation and drainage actions in the Ko'olau-Poko area. And then finally, to round it out, there are spending tools, and the city and county has its Clean Water and Natural Lands Fund, which the purpose of which is to acquire real estate interests for land conservation. There's actually going to be a ballot question 3 on the ballot this November, where Oahu residents will have the opportunity to expand the allowable use of this fund to include programs such as improvements and maintenance of required lands. And we're working very closely with the Department of Land Management to explore opportunities to use this as a potential source of funding for adaptation actions as well. So with that, I will end my presentation, but I'll remain here for questions if folks have any. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you, Alex. That's very helpful. I think we should start, we should allow questions at this point.
Should we try the Kauai video again?
What's that?
Should we try the Kauai video again?
We can try, yes, let's try.
You know, the life of a public servant offers us an opportunity to many times give the members of our public what we would consider not necessarily instant gratification, but tangible results. When we send our roads crew to fix a pothole, we give that community member that brought us to our attention sort of that responsiveness that they want to seek from government. We go and take care of a park. The kids that play there, they immediately can see the results. This type of measure is not one of those. This type of measure is something that we will not see the impacts of today, tomorrow, but it will be seen by our kids and our grandkids and for every generation that comes. The faces of climate change are starting to lap upon Kauai's shores and statewide and across the nation and across the world. What used to be a concept is now becoming a reality in both small and large ways. But we can intervene and we can make a difference. And today's historic occasion and signing this bill is one more step towards creating a resilient, sustainable future that our children, our grandchildren, and future generations will appreciate.
Our research team at the University of Hawaii developed the models which are used to define the sea level rise constraint district. We have two types of modeling. One is very granular, detailed elevation modeling of the land surface. And this land surface allows us to simulate the location of waters that would create flooding as a result of sea level rise. At 3.2 feet of sea level rise, which is what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change projects for future amounts of sea level rise towards the end of the century, we can depict flooding across the coastal land surface on Kauai and do color shading of that flooding at 1 foot increments. The second type of modeling that we developed is called wave run-up modeling. We all know about the waves here in Hawaii. They are seasonal. You get trade wind waves on the windward sides of the islands. We get swell on the south sides in the summertime and large swell on the north side in the wintertime. We've modeled all these different types of waves and how they run up on the shoreline under 3.2 feet of sea level rise. So we can add our flood elevations from the digital elevation models to the wave run-up elevations, and together they define the water surface, which is the basis for the sea level rise constraint district.
I worked with County of Kauai on this project. They approached us because we've done a lot of resilience work elsewhere in Hawaii, looking at policy for climate change adaptation. And really, they were the first in Hawaii to try to attempt to integrate sea level rise into their zoning code in a regulatory way. We have worked on guidance for other counties in terms of adapting development to sea level rise. And this was the first opportunity we had to work on integrating into the zoning code, which was very exciting. And so to approach that, we had to look around at examples from all over the country as well as the world, looking at other places that may have accomplished this. And to be honest, there were very few places that had attempted it, much less achieved it. So very proud of the county for taking this step and excited to be part of it.
This bill that was recently adopted is the Kauai Sea Level Rise Constraint District Bill, and it essentially takes map projections of the impacts that sea level rise will have on our coastal areas within this century. And so knowing where these flooding waters will essentially be, we need to be able to understand how our built environment should be designed around that. And so it essentially establishes sea level rise depths for passive flooding and high wave runup that will be caused by sea level rise, and requires certain structures to be elevated to accommodate those waters when they occur.
We've been lucky enough to partner with the County of Kauai for coming up on 10 years. And during that time, we've been able to work with them on different projects and different applications of the rules and regulations, incorporating data and model results into their processes. And we were very fortunate to be able to work with them as they began looking at the model outputs for sea level rise impacts along the coastline of Kauai. it's really been fascinating to watch them blend a proactive approach with a very pragmatic review of what the model results indicate, looking at how they affect the coastline and how they can be interpreted to better protect and mitigate from future coastal hazards. So we've been able to partner in that review and looking at what they've done with their own ordinances. It's inspiring to see how they've taken the state of the science that's being produced by the University of Hawaii Coastal Geology Group and incorporated it practically so that it really provides a common sense and pragmatic approach to future coastal hazard mitigation.
Thank you very much for all of your assistance and help. This is a true collaboration, so it's my honor. All right, we have ordinance.
And congratulations for getting it working. So now we have reports from all 4 counties. Thank you. Let's see, there's potential for a lot of questions on some of those exciting initiatives. But I think given that we have some other exciting things on our agenda that I think we can defer questions to the end, and because these are non-action items, and move to item number 6, which is the informational presentation on the 5-year sea level rise adaptation update. I'm going to call on Amy Wirtz with the Hawaii Sea Grant Program and OCCL. Go ahead, Amy.
Are you able to bring up the short presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. Amy, you have a soft voice, so maybe
No,
you...
I'll speak up. I will speak. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm just gonna move right here so I can see. Example. So,
Sorry, that's the wrong one. The first one I sent?
You just have the video.
thank you, Leah. Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone on the Zoom hear me okay?
Yes, sound good.
Okay, thank you. So thank you. My name is Amy Wirtz. I am with the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program, and I am an extension agent working in the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands. And I'm just going to talk with you briefly today about the work that we're doing to provide the 5-year update to the sea level rise vulnerability and adaptation report that was first promulgated in 2017. So the 2017 report was required by Act 83 in 2014 and further refined by Act 32 in 2017. And the report really was the first, a multi-agency process that created the first statewide assessment of Hawaii's vulnerability to sea level rise. And it proposed recommendations to reduce the exposure and sensitivity to sea level rise. Act 32 further required an update on a 5-year interval. And so we have a small team that's working together right now to put together that 5-year update. Rather than doing this as a very large scale process, what we're doing is just taking what was offered in the 2017 report, which had 4 sections to it, which was the sea level rise outlook with global and local observations and projections, a methodology section that really talked about the creation of the sea level rise viewer and the sea level rise exposure area, results that looked at what that looked like across the main Hawaiian Islands, and then a section of recommendations. And for 2022, this 5-year update we intend to do as chapters that map directly from those initial chapters. So an updated sea level rise outlook for the global and local observations, right? The 2017 report was based largely on the IPCC 5th assessment report and the 4th National Climate Assessment from the US Global Research Program. Since that time, there's been the 6th assessment report from the IPCC, as well as NOAA's NOAA-led effort for sea level rise technical reports in 2017 and 2022. So this 5-year update will provide, as is expected, the new science and the new projections, just to provide an update to the legislature and to the commission on that. From the methodology, really looking at what has been done to this point to update the sea level rise viewer and the sea level rise exposure area. The original report really went into depth on the methodology of creating that. We really just want to talk about the implementation of it and some small changes that have happened in the interim between 2017 and now. The results section looked at how that sea level rise viewer mapped across the Hawaiian Islands, and for this one, looking at the observed impacts of what we've seen since 2017 of sea level rise impacts, including the increased coastal erosion, increased king tides across all of Hawaii. And then taking the recommendations from the 2017 report, there were 9 recommendations with 49 recommended actions. And this will really be the bulk of the 2022 5-year update. First, looking at the status of those 2017 recommendations and reporting out on that. And then looking at what the next steps will be to map out the next 5 years until a full 10-year or potentially a full 10-year update to the report, and further recommendations for those that have already, recommendations that have already been met to replace those, continued action on the recommendations that have been partially met, and then potentially identifying some recommendations from the 2017 report that time has shown to no longer be viable recommendations. So as I said, can't read that slide at all, but the 2017 report recommendations really centered around supporting sustainable and resilient land use and community development. And then those 9 supporting recommendations that went around that. And so what we'll be doing on the next slide is showing each of those 9 recommendations. And really, this will just be a snapshot in time. We heard a lot of report outs just today from across the commission and the counties about the efforts that are ongoing for a lot of climate adaptation work, including sea level rise readiness. So this is a snapshot as of last week, as we are progressing on gathering all of the information and initiatives of what the state and county agencies have been doing to meet the recommendations of the report. And just a quick graphic showing the half full ones are things that are in progress. Some of the recommended actions that are, filled in full with a check mark that have been completely met, some that have not quite yet been started. So you can see that most of them are in progress or completed, with some that have not yet been started. But there will be graphics like this in the 5-year update that sort of give you the quick look, as well as the detailed information about the initiatives that are both completed and in progress towards meeting those recommendations. Excellent. This is just a few examples, these next 2 slides, of the kinds of products and tools that have been developed and promulgated since 2017. I will say that being fairly new to this workspace here in Hawaii, there's been a lot of work that's been done since 2017. And it's a really great opportunity with this 5-year update to capture that work and report on it back out to the legislature, as well as identifying those places where more work needs to be done, and maybe some previously unidentified areas where we need to do the work, some emerging areas or some new recommendations, and where the effort can really be steered towards the next one. So these were all just examples. We've heard about some of these today. And then the last part, after reviewing the recommendations, making some new recommendations, and then maybe kind of laying out a roadmap for how to get to the 10-year report and continue to make progress on this, is also going back. And you may recall that the report had learning questions in each section that will be answered in each of these new mapped over sections, but then also we intend to include an addendum at the end of the report that sort of takes that information specifically out to answer those questions. So that if you're going back through and looking at the 2017 report and wonder what the answer is to these questions that were in there for the updates, those will also be available separate. And so the timeline that we sort of proposed for completion of this is we intend to have a draft report to the Climate Commission and all the interagency partners for review by the end of October. That will give folks an opportunity to take a look at the proposed format, comment on that, but also for all of the state and county agencies to identify if there's anything we've missed. Our small group is trying to gather up all the information on the initiatives that have been undertaken, but really want to give everyone an opportunity to make sure we don't miss anything there. I'd like to have those comments and edits on the draft report back by the 18th of November to our drafting team, with the goal of having the final draft out by the 2nd of December to the commission for review, and a final report back out ready for the legislature before the holidays on December 15th, where we can have that promulgated. And just a brief update on what we're doing. And I failed to mention in the beginning that our drafting team includes myself, Leah, some of the interns who are working with the VISTA interns, as well as Brad, and representatives from the climate resilience team, Dr. Fletcher's group at the University of Hawaii. That's official.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm just so grateful for the partnership that University of Hawaii, DLNR have put together. Thank you, Chair Case, for making that possible. And the timeline is, I know, very aggressive, but I'm just delighted.
We have a pretty solid draft right now. So having one to you by the end of the month.
Wow, that is great. Okay, we have item number 7. Dr. Susan Crow, who is going to be reporting to us on the work that is planned for her amazing grant for natural and working lands. Go ahead, Dr. Crow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share exciting news with you folks. And this presentation is really just a preliminary announcement of some great news we received about a month ago. So as introduced, my name is Susan Crow. I'm an associate professor at University of Hawaii, and this is a project that we just found out was awarded that will be project managed through Linker Corporation. It is the partnerships, Hawaii Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities. And we were awarded a funding ceiling of up to $40 million for this project. And at this stage, that's kind of all we know. We're in a little bit of a holding period while we enter into a budget negotiation phase. Our proposal was substantially higher in dollar value. So 40 million is something we're really excited about. And so I can just give you a quick kind of introduction to what that proposal is now. And a little bit of history and where this proposal came from is of relevance to this commission. And so I always like to start with some of the history in terms of where our ideas centering on healthy, resilient landscapes for Hawaii came from. And we initiated some of the conversations through an artificial intelligence, so a data-driven approach here at the University of Hawaii. And so we retained some of those connections to the Office of Indigenous Innovation, and really thinking about the next phase of modern agriculture and how to re-envision that in the context of how humans interact with nature to provide societal needs associated with productive systems. Of more relevance here to this group, a key component of how this proposal came together was my participation in the U.S. Climate Alliance Natural and Working Lands research team, headed by Leah Laramie and supported by the commission. We've been doing quite a bit of work for the last several years as a group, and attended several of the U.S. Climate Alliance learning labs to really focus on science-based policy and incentives programs. And so we contributed to the 2021 Climate Ready Working Paper, and also contributed to the development of the Carbon Positive and Healthy Soils initiative that did successfully get passed through the legislation last year. So thank you for all of that support. In addition to the work that we do with the Healthy Soils research group at University of Hawaii, these 3 ongoing conversations led us to be in a position that when the $1 billion investment announcement came out of Washington, we were able to very, very quickly pull together this partnership and really put together a compelling proposal. And so the proposal came together via that history and those ongoing conversations. The lead partner is Linker. Major partners are University of Hawaii Manoa, of course, OII. We also have partners coming in to help with modeling and expertise from University of Florida, Colorado State, and then we have multiple local partners in Oahu ACA, NRDS, and transforming Hawaii's food systems together. Most importantly, this is centered on producers. And producer engagement team include a lot of our community-based producer organizations. It was via these organizations that we reached out and had just at the proposal stage, over 50 individual producers who fully developed climate smart implementation projects that went in associated with the project, with the proposal itself. So this was really incredible. Ulu Pono helped us bring this proposal together, and we had additional support from HDOA, the task force, Pacific Gateway Center, FarmLink, and Aloha Plus Challenge. And so this is the partnership, and we have an incredible portfolio. The portfolio centers on enabling climate smart commodities across Hawaii. We want to support producers in a diverse portfolio across agricultural sectors. This is one of the most unique things about our project. Not only is it the only group that was bringing in one of these big projects to Hawaii, where all of the funding will come here and the vast majority stays, we very specifically tried to target a diverse portfolio. And so we brought forests, agroforests, silvopasture, and rangelands, crop production, all together to the table. Some of the work that's been done in the task force was really critical to bringing that forth, as well as the U.S. Climate Alliance work. And so our major commodities are across the board, and that's one of the unique things about our project as well. So there's a couple of different components: data, measurement, monitoring, reporting and verification, decision support, markets, and branding, in addition to providing that support out. And at the proposal stage, we envisioned a phase 1 where we engaged those producers up front, and a phase 2 where we had a more inclusive outreach process so that more people could participate in a meaningful way down the road. So I personally really needed to wrap my head around what was a commodity before I was even willing to think about taking up leadership of this project. And so just at its bare bones basics, a commodity is defined as a raw material or primary agricultural product that can be bought and sold. So a little bit more close to home, here in Hawaii, there's the second definition on the screen: a useful or valuable thing such as water or time. And so it's really taking into consideration both of these definitions of commodity that we entered into this project. And so the foundations of the project are fourfold. We need to overcome implementation barriers, which were funded by the U.S. Climate Alliance work and our research team. We had already done outreach to identify what those barriers were through investments and incentives. We'll build decision support tools for verification and monitoring that we're actually achieving meaningful climate benefits through these practices. We'll improve technical assistance, working through our network of community-based groups, and through them working directly with the producers on the ground. And then we need to generate an internal momentum for that market-based system so that it provides support beyond the end of the project itself. But again, centered on this vision of rebuilding health, resilience, and abundance in landscapes and communities throughout Hawaii. So what are these climate smart supporting practices for Hawaii? The mainland set out a list of practices that sort of went along with the call for proposals, but because of the work that we've been doing at the University of Hawaii and with our outreach through the Natural and Working Lands with the U.S. Climate Alliance, we had already identified not only what we as researchers at the university and policymakers thought would be good climate smart management practices and land use here in Hawaii, but also had heard from producers themselves and the producer organizations, what people were interested in, and more importantly, what barriers they were coming up against when they thought about how to actually implement the practices they were interested in. And so we came up with a list already, and we're ready to hit the ground running in terms of developing projects. So these come in 3 categories, basically one-time large implementations, like a major land use change. So implementing an agroforestry system, afforestation, reforestation, co-reforestation is a good example. So another option are management changes. These would be annual management options, like compost is a really popular one, biochar amendment, reduced tillage, and cover cropping is another example that people might be familiar with. And then we're also investing in infrastructure to produce a circular economy. So basically anywhere where a farmer or producer wants a lot of compost, we're making an investment to ensure that there's a waste stream redirection of nutrients from waste into a soil amendment. And that's also an embedded climate benefit that we'll take into consideration. So here's sort of a table that just shows you the breadth and depth of what our producers were actually interested in. So this table is compiled of all of those producer-based projects that were actually developed. And so it's across all of the islands and across major sectors, and just drawing attention again on the right-hand side to the compost was one of our most popular implementations. I know a lot of good work has been done by this group in that arena. And so that's really shown in what kind of the preferences people have for implementing climate smart practices. Another one is a lot of increasing silvopasture and incorporating trees into grazing lands is another really, really popular one across the islands. And so one of the reasons we're able to pivot so quickly is all of the work we've been doing for healthy soils. And healthy soils is a central component to climate smart. So a lot of those practices are common between healthy soil health management systems and climate smart management systems. I like this table because it helps people wrap their heads around all of the different terminologies that are being used for agricultural systems, kind of looking towards a healthier, more sustainable future. Sustainable, regenerative, conservation, climate smart, and organic is on this nice summary table, which has then principles and practices along the side. And one of the reasons we were able to pivot so easily between climate smart and healthy soils is because soil health and rebuilding healthy soils is a component that's across the board in all of these agricultural systems. And so we had done a lot of good work in that area that was able to come together. So again, just to recenter what this project is all about is enabling meaningful climate benefits. And so part of what our work at the University of Hawaii will be, in conjunction with our agencies and also producer organizations and producers themselves, is the ability to define for ourselves, for Hawaii, what meaningful climate benefits are. And so one is direct CDR, carbon dioxide removal, carbon sequestration, GHG flux. If you're familiar with inventory-based approaches, these are sort of the carbon stock over time and GHG up or down. But the second component is that we're building in a computational structure that allows us to do a systems level assessment of climate benefits as well. So that includes tackling really tricky aspects of embedded emissions and leakage, which work outside of a strict greenhouse gas inventory approach. And we have a novel computational structure that we're hoping to enact from more of a life cycle analysis and an island level food systems resiliency perspective. And then the third component is not just that direct carbon dioxide removal at the system level or at the field level, but also climate adaptation and co-benefits associated with building soil health and the associated resilience and landscapes. And so that's also a very important component that was part of the proposal and part of this initiative and partnership at the national level. It's really important here in Hawaii. So I'll end there, and I can take questions if there's time, or save for later.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. That was amazing. We're looking forward to watching you roll that one out for the benefit of all of us who eat and have to live in a climate. Let's see.
Questions?
Do we
for
have,
the present-
do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we've heard some amazing proposals. Are there questions that you'd like to ask of the presenters? I'll give you a minute or a few seconds to think of something. And we've heard so much that it's possibly hard to go back and David Tarnas, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that if any of the county presenters or the presenters we just heard from Sea Grant and UH had any recommendations for state legislative action that would facilitate that your projects, achievement of your project's goals, let us know. As the counties have been figuring out how to move forward, have you identified any statutes that need to be modified in order to help you achieve your goal? As you put together this next report that for the commission for the 2023 legislature, are there any lessons learned that the county folks on this commission can pass on to include in that report? And then, Susan, Dr. Crow, as you do your work, it'd be very helpful if you identify if there are statutory barriers that maybe we should modify. This is an ongoing process, so I just want to say I'm open to those ideas. Don't have to tell me now, but just I think we encourage you to contact us because you're smart people and you've thought through this. So give us some ideas. Thanks very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Tarnas. Zendo, did you raise your hand? No. Okay.
No, I was just giving him a shock, but that we'll be in touch. Mahalo.
All right. All right. Are there any other questions?
Luke has his hand raised.
What's that? Luke Myers, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Maybe it's a broader question for a follow-up on some of from a hazard vulnerability perspective, that there was obviously a common theme kind of percolating between the counties from a risk assessment perspective. One of the things that Chip has done a nice job on, and I don't, and maybe I'm missing it, and maybe it's buried underneath, but in any of the counties' regulations and what they're setting forward, is there any look at groundwater infiltration? Again, Chip has brought out some really interesting thoughts and comments and perceptions of, obviously sea level rise is obvious. And we're talking a lot about erosion and adaptation and backing away from the coast. But when we're seeing it at the surface, there's an assumption that we're seeing saltwater intrusion into the coastal area. So maybe it's a future topic to consider, but I would be interested from that hazard perspective because it does expose a lot of hidden infrastructure that we have buried in easements and on the coastlines. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Other questions? Do we see any hands up? No. Hands?
Nancy, nope. Nancy has one.
Nancy, go ahead.
This is a question for Kevin Sullivan at Hawaii County. You're doing some really sophisticated GIS modeling. Are you able to account for shoreline subsidence? Globally, subsidence of shorelines is beginning to be in certain areas. And I'm just wondering if anybody's starting to take that into account.
But I would say we're there.
Subsidence. The last place we had documented significant subsidence was in Kapoho, and that Madam Paley sort of took care of that for us. So my quick answer is no. Right now, not so much. That being said, we have lacked good, solid baseline data to even, in my opinion, to even sort of start to look at that. And it's also very localized. I'm hoping that a lot of this work will lead to future work. As we reported, we have a lot of varied coastlines. There's a lot of different things going on in different places. So I think that's something that we definitely will focus on in the future, but it's not a significant portion of this current work.
Thank you, Kevin. Aaron, are you still there? Because it seemed like Maui County was taking into account subsidence as well at one point.
Good
Go
afternoon.
ahead.
I am still here. I do not believe that we have the data to be tracking subsidence in the models that we're using, but I would actually, that would be a question I would defer to the Sea Grant folks that ran those models to answer.
Okay. I see Amy is nodding.
Yeah, I agree, right? Chip Scoop is probably the right place to look for that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. And are there any other questions before we move to our coordinators update? You see any? Okay, we'll move to the last item on our agenda. This is the coordinators update. And I'm going to call on Leah Laramie, our coordinator, to give the update. Go ahead, Leah.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience and sticking around through all the technical difficulties. Really, really, really appreciate it. Yeah, so we'll just breeze through this. We heard last time about our Punaluu Beach project. We're doing a feasibility study on some nature-based solutions to protect the shoreline and then the road attached to it. So we've identified some community engagement dates that I just wanted you folks to be aware of. They're down here, Friday, October 28th, the 29th, and in November on the 4th and 5th. We'll be out there with some of our partners, just talking to community members, trying to explain, what our thoughts behind the project is and get feedback on what they'd really like to see happening with the shoreline. We have been working really closely with some great folks on identifying funding and as well as technical assistance for grant writing support, partnering with Huanani Partners and the Climate Group. So they're helping us both to identify the grant opportunities and as well as finding funding not only through those grants, but also for the implementation. So either with large and direct rates that we can charge or with specific funding for additional personnel, because that's a lot of the feedback we've been getting is there's a lot of funding out there, but it's not just receiving the grants, it's also the implementation as well as the grant reporting that limits folks in applying for these. So right now we're using the grants to project bridge as our guideline for identifying the projects and reaching out to various state and county agencies. But if you have any climate change projects you would like some additional assistance in with writing the grants, as well as identifying funding for specific projects, please feel free to reach out to me. I recently attended the U.S. Climate Alliance Governor's Office team meeting. We did a site visit to the research center here in Denver, Colorado, looking at the different technologies for renewable energy. But we also discussed a lot of really great topics, including federal funding opportunities and challenges. So kind of exactly what I just spoke about before, about all this wonderful funding coming through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. So really understanding what funding is available, how funding is being allocated to various agencies, and when those opportunities are coming out so we can be better organized and make sure that we don't leave funding on the table. We also discussed how funding for both of these large pots of money are really going to impact or projected to impact emission reductions. So they've been really great in mapping that out and seeing how much of this investment will really bring down emissions, leaving the rest obviously to the states. So, it's a great exercise in seeing how funding really does make direct impacts on greenhouse gas emission reduction. We also talked about the state climate opportunity assessment. So it's mapping, again, another mapping project. So identifying gaps and seeing where each of us stand, each of the states in the US climate alliance stands, so that we can help support, see if someone's been really advanced in certain areas, we can reach out to them and connect and ask them, how they got there, and vice versa, help out other states where we might have some leadership in those areas. We also were looking at what other actions we really want to ask of the federal administration currently. There are certain topics that we feel states can address by themselves. So we were working to identify which of those topics there were, and the best ways that we think that our federal partners can really address those. And then finally looking at what analytical needs we have, what models we have that could help to support us in our greenhouse gas reductions, as well as what the best way to present that information and make it more accessible to states. We heard earlier from Chair Case on COP27. As she mentioned, I will be in attendance. It's really an opportunity for us to keep Hawaii on the global stage, even as we transition through this administration. So with the climate registry, they're going to have a pavilion there in which we're going to participate and help to support. And I'll be on a panel looking at investments in infrastructure with climate benefits. And that's looking at, green buildings, transportation, energy programs, other investments that we've made. So if anyone has, some of the highlights that you folks shared today will really help to feed that. But if you have any specific topics that you'd really like me to highlight on this panel, please feel free to reach out to me and we can talk more about them. So make sure I have some good pictures and some good content. And then I'm also joining the US Climate Alliance. They have 2 events in the works on the 14th and 15th. And really their key message is stating that, states are really taking climate action on the global stage as well as locally. And through state action, we have that durability as we shift through different federal administrations. So we're able to continue that ambition in the international collaboration. We continue to support the UH Speaker Series. Tonight, there's actually a talk at UH at the Architectural Building. It's Julie Bertwald talking about coral reefs and the future of that. So if anyone has no plans for this evening, please join us. It should be a good discussion. And then our big announcement for our, we're restarting our Climate Commission conferences. So we're going to have a Climate Week, January 10th through the 12th. Next year. It will be held at the Inman Conference Center, which is the East-West Center conference areas where we've had them past years. We're partnering with PICAST, Pacific RISA, and HNEI. So we're working to really make this as practical of a session as possible. We're looking at the different ways that we can support folks in achieving more finance for climate action. We're doing climate action planning. We're looking at adaptation sciences as well as climate policies. So we're still working on the agendas for this, and I'll give you more details as we go. But I just wanted to let you know that we've finally solidified our date and we'll be taking this on. And then before I totally close out, we did really want to thank co-chair Suzanne Case for all of her work. Unfortunately, it's our last meeting with Suzanne, and we just really appreciate all of the dedication and hard work you've given bringing the Climate Commission to life and throwing your support behind it and allowing us to get as far as we have with all of this work.
Thank you so much.
So
well, all of you climate champions, keep going.
Yeah, well, we know you're going to continue to be a climate champion. So but thank you, because you did get so much done. As today's meeting is evidence of.
That's why I love the updates. It's like when you compare it to, nobody really knew what to say at the first couple of updates. And now there's just so much going on, and we're all like learning from each other and getting inspired by each other and sharing, and it's amazing. It's really wonderful.
Okay, we've reached the end of our agenda. We want to thank everyone who presented and who had the patience to stay and learn from these amazing presentations. And as Leah said, there will be a conference in January between at the East West Center, and then there will be a quarterly meeting in April. Is that right?
Yes, so the conference will make it a commission meeting so that everyone can join and participate, and we don't have to worry about sunshine rules as much. I have to figure out exactly how that works. We'll work with our AGs. But it will be a commission, it will be considered a commission meeting so that everyone can participate without violating sunshine.
Great. And then April will resume, and by that time, probably all of our technical difficulties will be resolved. It'll go smoothly as probably a hybrid in-person and Zoom meeting, because it does allow our neighbor island participants to join us and make it much easier. Okay, well, thank you all. And if anybody has any final comments, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Mahalo, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.